All right, I would like to introduce Mark Croft and Gerald Mcphail. We're going to spend a few minutes here on WPA. So take it away, guys.
Hello, hello, hello. Is that coming through?
You're not testing?
Hello, hello.
Sorry.
Hello, hello, hello.
There you go. All right. This is taking its own sweet time.
So this is, I think, from what I can sense from the audience, this is one of these highly anticipated sessions. We're going to be disclosing a number of new features that haven't been seen, I wish. So actually what we're going to do is try and explain a little bit about the purpose and role of WPA in Windows XP, and also try and explain to you a little bit how it's implemented. So if you like, try and take away some of the myth that has grown around WPA really since Christmas time. So let me just say, who we are. So I'm a product manager for Windows Division, and so if you like, I look after certain aspects of like how this is actually represented to users. But I'm really lucky today we've got Gerald here, Gerald Mcphail, and he really looks after the overall development effort for this area. And a couple of things I just wanted to say up front, because Gerald's going to take us through a short number of slides on this, which I suggest you let him do before we get into Q&A. And the other reason I should make clear, there's two of us up here, because we thought it would take you longer to physically sort of kind of kill and slaughter and chop up two of us. So, we kind of thought you can start with me, and then, that'll take 5 minutes or so, and then work on to Gerald. So that was part of the area there. But bear in mind that this actual technology and what it's trying to do is actually shipped in Office, and I'm not sure how many people really recognise that. So we've had it in Office for since last summer, in fact. So the big news here is, hey, this is now popping up in Windows. And like, why are we doing that? Well, what is the overarching goal here? And a non-goal is to try and make users' life difficult, whether they're a consumer user, whether they're an expert user. That's a non-goal. But what we are trying to do is, we just know that across the whole IT industry, we continue to have a fairly major issue with piracy, and more specifically, the area that we call casual copying. And like, this technology is essentially just to really try and make people aware that you shouldn't casual copy Windows, you should license Windows in some way or form. Having said that, we need to walk the balance here between doing that in a way that's non-intrusive to people that are legitimately licensed, versus, if you like, being able to make sure that we were able to highlight it to people that aren't doing it right. How are we doing?
14 days left for activation here.
So that really just sets the scene here. And one of the things I think we can usefully do in some of this section, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of questions on this trying to clarify some of the detail, but we welcome some of your feedback on this in terms of how it would impact your world in the way you use Windows today. And I suspect a number of people out here do build machines a lot, do a lot of rebuilds, do wipe and loads and all that sort of stuff. And we definitely want to understand how you see this and what some of your requirements are in terms of impacting the way you work. All right.
It's taken forever to get started. I think I need a new computer. I have to talk to my boss about that one. So hi. Our team is the one that created this thing called WPA, and we borrowed heavily from Office, as Marcus correctly pointed out. This thing has been out for a couple of years now in various forms. So it should, we've got quite a bit of experience with the technology. So I'm Gerald Mcphail, and we'll start off with our goals. First of all, it was to reduce piracy in a particular area, which is casual copying. Understand that we all, I think everybody recognizes that piracy costs billions of dollars to the industry in general, and of course to Microsoft as well. The consequence of all this piracy, of course, is that we all end up paying one way or another. Ultimately, it gets passed on to the consumer. The casual copying part, there's a perception that casual copying is really a small part, and that we really ought to be after the counterfeiters. Well, that's not, actually, that's not entirely true. According to the SIAA, which is actually we don't belong to them, the industry association, Software Industry Association, the casual copying represents about half of all piracy. So that's a significant amount. So WPA is designed to enforce end-user licensing, the EULA. Another key goal that we had was to maintain user privacy. And in order to do this, we've been very, very careful to ensure that we split the concept of activation and registration. The activation process actually ships a minimal amount of data. You can see that if you activate by telephone. It doesn't require any personally identifiable information at all. And whereas registration process, which is completely voluntary, does in fact, of course, require you to provide contact information for updates and information that we or third parties can send. A third major goal that we had was to minimize the hassle factor. In other words, to make it as easy as humanly possible to activate your system. And if we have a couple of seconds later, I'll show you. I'm sure, is there anybody here who hasn't been through the process? Raise your hands. All right, you know. And those who have seen it know that it is not a hard thing. Even if you do telephone activation. How many of you have done telephone activation? All right, it's a fair number. So you know that even that is not an onerous process. So the next question is, who has to activate? Not everybody does. In fact, it's primarily the retail package products, 32-bit Windows only, not IA64. And I'll point out that there's also a 30-day grace period. Right now, of course, all of you who are beta testers have been using 14-day grace periods. It's primarily so that we can test the border cases and things like that. Get the number of activations up. So new OEM PCs, most of those from OEMs will ship, and we distinguish between two types of OEMs. There are the ones who actually build hardware like Dell and Gateway and a lot of smaller ones, and Compaq and so on. And then there are system builders. In any event, all of the OEMs are able to pre-activate if they wish, either in the factory or if in the case of a system builder, they can pre-activate on behalf of the customer. A recovery CD is, any of you who've bought computers from Dell or whoever have generally received a CD that comes with it called a recovery CD, or possibly more than one. And these CDs may or may not require activation. That's actually that's optional, and it's based on the choice. In fact, both of these are based on the choice of the OEM. There's the third very major area in the product line called volume licensing and our volume channels. Volume customers are people who have enterprise agreements, select agreements, open agreements, and things like campus and whatnot agreements. And these products will be using special both keys and media. Volume licensing keys are required. They're unique to the organization and on volume licensing media. These do not require activation. So we've got a lot of people, God, there's so much misinformation floating around about this stuff. One of which is that volume licensing and corporations will have to activate, and that's just not the case.
One point I'd like to make there is I don't know how many people are familiar with Open, which is, if you like, the smaller end of volume licensing. But open licensing really becomes, if you like, attractive in terms of value, which is cost from 5 licenses up. So you don't have to be a very big business to actually want to be into the open license program in terms of flexibility. And within those 5 licenses, you can mix and match your Office with Windows. So I think that's one of the things I've seen in some of the news groups is people don't realize that, never mind a single user, but for the small business environment, the open program ought to cut in at a relatively low level in terms of number of licenses.
Right. So how does WPA work? I'm going to step through this pretty quickly. This is just so that you understand the actual process and flow. First off, on the left-hand side of the picture, we have the client, which is Windows XP. And then on the right-hand side, across this dashed line, which represents the internet, is the clearinghouse. I shouldn't say it represents the internet. I didn't actually show a cloud and all that kind of thing because of the different methods for activating, because you've got not only online activation, but you can also activate offline. So the first step in the process, which is actually not really, strictly speaking, activation, however, we rely very much on this thing called a product key. So is during the setup process, the product key gets entered. At some point, at many points perhaps, the user is prompted to activate, and that's an enforced. The activation is enforced, as I said before, within the 30-day period, or at the 30-day period. When you choose to activate, and you can choose different ways. You can click on the little balloon reminder. You can click on Activate Windows launch the Activate Windows from the Start menu. At that time, you can choose. In fact, can you see that screen? Okay, there's a lot of words in it because we have to say a lot in this picture. This is the latest activation screen. And those of you who've been using the beta and even relatively recent versions will notice that there's a few differences, if you can see it. The first is that you have a choice right off the bat. There's a button, the first one, the radio button says, yes, I want to activate over the internet now. The second one says, or the bottom one says, no, I want to remind me every few days. I don't want to activate now. One of the new things that's here, and this is a result of concerns that have been expressed by people, is the ability to be able to activate offline via telephone manually right off the bat. Before, with beta and so on, we kind of guided you through it and tried to do the internet option first. So those who are especially concerned about privacy or connectivity or whatever can click on the telephone activation mechanism right away. So as I said, you got your choice. What this does is it creates an installation ID, which is actually 42 digits worth of information. By the time we add checksums to it, it's 50. The installation ID contains what we call the product ID, which is derived from the product key. We add to that the hardware hash, and then that's what gets sent off to the clearinghouse. That's that next process. The clearinghouse then processes the installation ID, verifies the validity, verifies the range is reasonable, verifies components within that, and then checks to see whether it's been blocked, those kinds of things, and then, assuming everything is well, returns a confirmation ID, which is also 42 digits, but again, it's less than that because of the check digits. Confirmation is received and then updated, and lo, you've got yourself a perpetual license. So let's go on to WPA myths. The first one is that counterfeiters are the problem. I addressed that already in the first slide. Casual copying is approximately 50% of this ball game, and that's the target we're trying to reach here, is to make sure that people who, and by the way, a lot of people don't even realize that it's not a good thing to take your copy and give it to Fred. And so we believe, and that's based on our prior experience with Office, that this will help reduce that type of piracy, or counterfeit, or not counterfeit, that type of piracy as opposed to counterfeiting. Counterfeit, we do have other piracy, anti-piracy programs, such as edge-to-edge holograms on CDs and that type of thing. Another myth is that WPA requires internet access. Well, as you've just seen, that's not true. We have the ability to do it over the telephone. I should point out that, as you all know, right now we're on limited hours. As we get to general availability of the product, we'll be moving into full 7x24. Not in all locations, because we got some constraints that we can't, that we have to address. But in most locations, it'll be 7x24. And it'll also be in most locations or most situations, it'll be toll-free. What is not generally perhaps known is that if you can't reach us via the toll-free number, you can also call us collect. So it's a free phone call, whatever. Another myth is that WPA compromises privacy, or my privacy. And as I pointed out, I mean, one of the things you can always do to verify that, or to ensure that, to see what's actually going on here, is that our 42 digits, well, I don't know if anybody has tried to cram a lot of personal information into 42 digits, but it's not very likely. And the internet version of this, although there's a couple of smaller handshakes, we're sending exactly the same information over the wire. But for anybody who's really paranoid, just go for the telephone. And of course, one of the other objections we get is, well, you always know my telephone number when I call you. Well, call from somebody else's phone number. It's not that bad. Go to your girlfriend, wherever. call from a payphone. As I said before, we really take the privacy issue very seriously. It's good business, and it just makes sense all around. We're concerned about our own privacy as individuals. Another myth is I'll lose fair use of my windows. Again, and this kind of addresses the first one again, a lot of people think that, well, I bought this thing, so I own it. I can do anything with it I want. Well, that's actually not the case. There are terms and conditions in the license which Microsoft specifies, and as long as it's under applicable laws, these determine what you can and cannot do with your license. And so it's a misnomer, it's an error to think that just because you have this thing, you can trade it around. I think everybody really realizes that, or most of us realize that. I'm not sure that a lot of people on the street really realize that sometimes. So what we're trying to do again is enforce the EULA, the legitimate use of the product. I had a few other points on that one. I'm not sure what they were at this point, but anyway, corporations must activate. Again, I've dispelled that myth before with volume licensing. Typically, I should also mention here that for those we got beaten up a little bit by PSS is what happened. We didn't originally plan on building any kind of automation into this thing in terms of at least post-setup automation. And they said, hey, there are companies out there, believe it or not, who really do want to buy retail media, and do, in fact, buy retail media. There are other situations where perhaps a corporation may be responsible for the installation, but in fact, individuals are responsible for the purchase and therefore own the license. So there are situations where it becomes desirable to be able to purchase, or the need to have individual or retail media that you can then automate the activation on. So we built some automation tools. These tools have not been in the builds up to now, but they will be starting with the next IDW, I believe, after 2469. And when they are available, I'll also make sure that we post on the website under product activation the WMI scripts, some sample scripts to play with them. And then the last one, I'm going to probably rely more on Mark on, which is that all users really dislike product activation. Certainly there's been a lot of press, a lot of negative sentiment. I personally believe that most of that is based on either misinformation or some concerns that Microsoft may not respect privacy, et cetera, et cetera. There are actually groups that are happy for this, that we have this product activation. Those are especially resellers, system builders, those kinds of folks, who in fact earn their bread and butter on reselling and integrating and reselling systems, including licensed products. And they have to compete with those who are giving them or stealing them and then basically giving them away. Would you like to add some comments in this area at all?
Well, I think what I'm hoping is, and I think this expert zone community is part of us trying to really hear what the wider Windows community is thinking about product activation. So the feedback mechanism, but also hopefully the fact that you guys perhaps get a bit more information and a bit more education on this, we can at least get to the point where, regardless of whether people actually like it or not, they at least understand the role of it and can accept it for what it is, and hopefully not see it as anything that's got any clandestine objectives or any big overhead on their particular effort.
The vast majority of our customers are basically going to be very minimally impacted by this. We know that obviously we as a group who do a lot of software installations and reinstallations and so on will take a bigger hit than the vast majority of all the users. But nonetheless, we expect that the user experience, and this is borne out by also Office experience with activation for the most part, has been very smooth. And we've used all the experiences from Office and Office 2000 pilots, as well as what our own experience through you guys, the beta testers, to improve what we've done so we make it as easy as possible to use. So I think we can.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's like a little, hopefully levels the playing field on some of the how it works, the mechanisms are. Let's why don't we try and make good use of the remaining time in terms of getting feedback. I'd certainly like to know if anyone's run into any genuine issues in actually getting their own activations to activate, but also then people's opinions about we're doing the right things here. Any feedback? So let's right. So I think actually that gentleman there was probably about the first up in the air.
Here?
No, sorry, that's just behind me.
I'm not sure you can answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I won't argue the fact that Microsoft deserves compensation according to its licenses, and we're all paying for software piracy. So when the number of home users that register for WPA increases by 100%, can we expect to see Microsoft reduce the price of their software?
That is definitely one that we've been expecting, and I will let him deal with it.
Fair question. Difficult, but fair. And what I would say is, as you probably know, we've not finalised the pricing yet for this product, right? And clearly, if we look at what we anticipate in terms of both consumer adoption and business adoption over the other Windows Millennium 98 and obviously Windows 2K Pro, then the fact that we know we've got this built in and what we think it's going to do in terms of eliminating certain styles of copying, then we will, clearly we're going to factor that into what we see as retail price and upgrade price. Yeah, hold it. That gentleman there, I think was.
When you went over the issue of how I will point the bullet, I will lose my use of Windows functionality and that sort of thing. I think one of the concerns that I've heard is that if you make major hardware changes, that after a specific number of times, you're not going to be able to use that product anymore.
Right, and
I would assume you'd have to reactivate somehow.
Correct. So
beyond the base.
Yeah. So if you churn your system components over to a certain point, change a number of components.
Or what if I clean my hard drive, reformat 10 days in a row or 15 days in a row for other reasons,
right,
and do reinstallation? Am I going to be blocked from reinstalling?
Yeah. Why don't I address that one? Since this hardware hash algorithm and approach has been the subject of a lot of discussion. The whole issue of reinstalling onto different hardware or changing your hardware is like I said, a lot of controversy around that one. Unreasonably, in the sense that the answer is yes. First of all, your EULA is what rules, and what we're trying to do again is enforce the EULA. So yes, you will be able to reinstall onto different hardware. That is a permitted operation. And but there is no, and we do plan on a deactivation feature sometime downstream, but we couldn't do it in this time frame. So in the meantime, it does require a phone call if you completely reinstall or blow away your system. Or I should say a telephone call, right? To the customer. Sorry?
You reinstall on the same system.
If you reinstall on this, I'm talking about if you reinstall on the same hardware, then that should go through the internet automatically. If you actually reinstall on a different system, you want to transfer the license, that will require a telephone call to the CSR.
You are saying that if for whatever reason I do a reinstall on the same system, maybe with a video card change or something like that, but a reformatted hard drive, say 10, 15, 20 times in a row,
You're okay.
it'll install regardless.
You're cool. We're actually still working. Well, I was going to address this anyway. Because there are other folks who've had their hands up here, I want to make sure that there's a couple of people who have been get their time in here. So the exact details I don't want to really get into, to be honest. But let's just say that just about everything that's measurable that we can measure on your system is what we are measuring, and so we have a kind of a stew that we're using to pull that together. The key thing is that there's not one component of that we can trace back to your machine. So, for example, we take the MAC address and we crunch it up with a one-way transformation. So And the other point I'll make about that is that we're going to be improving that algorithm and improving the approach over time, like with service packs and that sort of thing. So, what our goal is the same as yours, to minimize the hassle of doing the hardware ID or the hardware hash choice or process, and to minimize the phone calls, quite frankly. So actually, there was a gentleman over here, I think, who had a question.
Yeah.
Well, he was anyway.
So I think it's on four hands here. Why don't we say we'll try and take two gentlemen there and two gentlemen here. Let's try and at least take those. So why don't we start off on the left? And gentleman in red.
What's the ultimate arbiter of decision making? Is there any kind of arbitration? If I can't get my product activated after 10 changes in my hardware, I get new motherboard, or I'm testing motherboards for somebody, and you guys say, no, you can't run it anymore. And I disagree. I'm only one person. I'm the only one using this computer. Is there any kind of outside arbitration? Legal? I don't know.
Our intent is in that scenario, you would, still be able to use that same Windows license regardless of the number of times you.
What if you said what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What if the person entering the phone says no?
Yeah, no,
What do I do?
I honestly don't have I don't have an answer to that right now, and that's great feedback. What would be the ultimate end stop? Yeah. Thanks for I'll take feedback on that. So, gentleman in red.
Okay, first off, I want to say thanks to Gerald. This past year, the news group, we appreciate your support. But
I appreciate yours too, by the way.
I have no problem with activation per se. What I have a problem with is will be addressed when we have a way to deactivate. But my problem is public perception of WPA actually hurts my sales. It's already killing me on Office XP. I pre-sold, I'm in a small market, I pre-sold 150 copies of Office 2000. I have not been able to pre-sell a single copy of Office XP. I haven't even ordered any. I will do it by special order only because of WPA. My understanding is with Office 2000 we had the WPA in there as well. Maybe people were just not aware of it.
Some of my customers will upgrade past Service Pack 1 because of that.
Right.
I personally will not go past Service Pack 1 because I want at my computer.
To the point that people are actually saying they don't want it.
I don't have time to take time to call in when they were online, so, okay, you've activated.
Yeah. I'm gonna make one point here, and that is that frankly I think we could have done a whole lot better job of explaining what this is all about, and we've come under some criticism for not. The Windows product activation and to a lesser extent perhaps Office XP, because it's maybe not quite as visible, there's just like I said, a tremendous amount of sensationalism and misinformation floating around about this thing. We need to clear that up. We really need to work hard on that.
Yeah, this information's killing.
I know. I understand. We're hearing that.
It's not just that. I mean, it gets down to simple dollars and cents. And I've got a prime example of it. I installed an advanced server. The number would not go through. I had to sit down and reformat and reset up that server from scratch because the WPA would not run. And the thing is, it's not, you got two things. One's the cost of the software itself when you buy it. The other is cost of ownership.
Absolutely.
And WPA, when you have to keep calling in to reactivate, it raises that cost of ownership. And these people, systems integrators like myself, are being paid by the people who are going, why am I having to pay you to be on the phone to do this every time? This is ridiculous. And I have already had most of my clients they come right out and ask me, what's going to happen when you upgrade this equipment? Are you going to have to keep calling Microsoft? Is what I'm reading true? I say, well, it depends on what we're doing, but yes, it can happen. And they're going, I don't want it then. I don't have the time for you to be messing with it. And what happens if it screws up? Then my server goes down? I mean, and this is a very real concern for people such as myself. And like I said, I have been bit by it already, and I got zero help on it. I had to reformat and start over. There goes either $500 worth of my time, or they pay me an extra $500, but it's coming out of somebody's pocket, not Microsoft's. It's coming out of mine. Yeah. And I'm sorry, it gets down to dollars and cents. You cannot survive on that sort of thing. It's raising the cost of ownership too much. I helped with one of the biggest software piracies in the South. okay, with Microsoft, work with one of your people. I'm all for anything that drops the piracy. It takes money out of it. And I don't think there's anybody here that would disagree. But this is not the way. A single registration, I got zero problem with it. But the way WPA is right now, I'm sorry. This is going to hurt. It's going to hurt bad.
Do you typically sell, like effectively retail products to your customers? Is that typical?
I do any sort of thing. I do upgrades on people's systems. I do new installations.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm basically an outsourced MIS house, and I do a full scope.
Right.
So, I mean, I see I'm one of these rare people that actually sees everything from the retail end all the way to the OEM end.
Right.
And, I've been through this, and I've been through this with other companies, and like I said, and yes, there's a lot of misrepresentation. And myself and the gentleman in the red shirt over there, if you go back and look in the product activation news group, we've actually listed things out, not in a fanatical way. We're putting down real financial concerns here.
Right.
And and we both agree, you guys deserve to get the money you deserve. And of course, with me, if I find illegal software and a thing, I say either y'all get legal or I'm gone. I won't even touch it. I walk out the door. And I've got every one of my clients legal because of it. And there's no question, because they realize I'm just not going to mess with it. I can't afford it. Because I can't afford my connections within Microsoft to be chopped off because I'm doing it. And that's the way I put it to them.
I'd just like to jump in with one point, and that is that, again, we are in beta, and I know that, we don't have full service on the clearinghouse right now. If you can't activate, if anybody can't activate a system within 5 or 10 minutes max, then there's something seriously wrong. I'm talking about with the RTM product.
I've spent 18 minutes on the phone, and the numbers never work.
And like I said, we're in beta right now. We have had some problems. We've made it a heck of a lot easier in the UI now. Yeah.
I know my administrator here wants to draw a line on this at about 4 o'clock, so thank you for that. And let's just try. I know I did there's 2 people down here that had questions, so I think it's this gentleman here.
Yes, as beta testers, we test on more than one machine. Are we able to activate on more than one machine as well?
Oh, yes.
During the beta.
Yeah.
After the beta?
Well, the RTM EULA is what it is, and there are other programs like MSDN and Tech and so on where you can do those kinds of things. If there are special, and I don't know exactly how the beta works, after the beta, what the mechanics of that are, but yeah, we'll have to talk to John Gray or somebody about that.
Another question here.
Can you bring up that license thing again?
Unfortunately, I ran out of battery.
Okay, anyway, well, I remember it. I found is that your newest screen?
Yeah.
Because I found it confusing. The telephone button is on the bottom.
Yeah.
The telephone, yes, that should be a radio button. Because if you want to click telephone, which of the 2 buttons do you click? One that says do the internet, or one I don't want to remind me later.
Say something real quick. The next button was grayed out until you hit yes, activate.
That's correct. It needs to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess if you made the telephone one of the 3 on top.
I will pass that input on actually to the UV team. Those are the guys who are specifically responsible for the UI. Thank you for that.